Some examples too, like we said, are statistics, evidence, testimony, and real examples. Using examples from real life that actually illustrate a point that are based on facts, not emotional appeals, is what we're talking about with Logos. Gather visual supporting material. Seeing is believing. Reinforce key ideas with visual aids. And like I said, the most effective ones are typically the simplest. Keeping in mind, though, the caveat where we talked previously about the level of thinking and cognitive demand, simple is the most effective. Simple does not necessarily mean it's not complex. It just means it's in a format that people can kind of look at and get the information quickly from. A lot of times you don't want to spend an hour reading a chart when you're reading a 40-page paper. The fallacies, these are flaws in the reasoning that lead to faulty, illogical statements. I have done some really fun projects with my students on this and showed them the different fallacies, and we've broken them down and given examples, and they were hilarious. When you do see these things constantly in the media, even in written research, I've seen them occur where people make assumptions or link data that actually cannot be used in that format, overgeneralize. Perhaps sometimes they look at surveys or questionnaires and they start trying to look at causation when they shouldn't be. And I know you guys have all heard that. What is it saying? It's correlation does not necessarily equal causation. It's that kind of mistake that occurs quite often. We had some examples on here. Let's see. Slippery slope, loaded question. My mom was horrible about those. Oh, everything was loaded. It's like, you love me. You're going to empty the dishwasher, right? But it's things like where you start loading what you're saying and having an intentional action in mind. And so it's asked in a way that, of course, you know what the answer is supposed to be. Does anybody have any fun examples? Let's get 3 or 4 quick ones just for fun. I'll look at these ones. Absolutely, I apologize. Anybody else need one? While you're looking, I'll talk about a couple, especially for our distance learners. Appeal to nature. Just because something is made from natural ingredients does not necessarily make it healthy or safe to consume. And so you look at, okay, vegans, for example. They are eating, ideally, all natural things. They come from no animal products. So you picture in your head somebody that's very healthy. Well, just because it is made naturally doesn't mean it wasn't fried and put in any number of things. And so it doesn't mean healthy. And so you also see arguments for all kinds of medications and herbal supplements. What was that?
Moonshine.
Moonshine is a perfect example. Marijuana, whatever it is, there's a lot of things that are with moderation or whatever else. So what happens is appealing to something based on the fact that it is natural doesn't really do much. Let's see, we have some other words. Ambiguous, you see that a lot. People are completely ambiguous and don't actually answer the question. Politics is huge with that. You ask somebody what their side or perspective is on something, they don't want to give their bottom line out. I'm sure our conflict resolution people know about that. What is the bottom line? Well, you don't want to tell, so you intentionally kind of skew the answer to the point where you're not really answering. Well, what is it you would like to see from this? What salary would you like? Shoot, I don't want to say if I'm in a job interview, would you? So people are intentionally ambiguous about the way they do that. Do we have some other examples some of you have come up with?
Please. Appeal to emotion. I get a lot of mail from like PETA and some nonprofit organizations that have, a picture of a poor little animal and things like that. It's really appealing to the emotion, not like the logic part of the persuasion.
Right. They might not be showing any facts, statistics. So many animals died. It's showing you this emotional plea. they've disturbed some music for me now. There's some beautiful music that they play, and now every time I listen to some songs, it's just depressing because it links it in a way. But there are several of these that you do see periodically. Any others anybody wants to share?
The Texas sharpshooter, when someone says, but this one time, this one thing happened, and they cite one example, but they're not looking at all the other times that that one thing didn't happen. So they're just using one piece of the data instead of all of the data that could be used.
It happens a lot with religion, where somebody selectively picks out, and I think that's actually another one on here too, but the selection of taking something out of context and not presenting it the right way. So, for example, that actually happened in Afghanistan a lot, where people would take, it's a mostly illiterate population, and so they are predominantly like all Muslim. And what happens is people that are literate come over and say different things to them about what their religion says, and they say it in a knowledgeable way, and they seem very credible. Perhaps they have the outfits on or different things that make them look holier than thou. But just because you look the part, or just because you're literate, does not mean that you're presenting the information in a fair and accurate way. So people can come over, and unfortunately, the people in Afghanistan, especially those that are illiterate, are somewhat susceptible to being told that their religion is enforcing a certain perspective or way or action. And so that's what happens in different countries and different groups in society, is they fall prey to some of the fallacies that people, unfortunately, will do. Yes?
Another one, black or white. I feel like George W. Bush did that a lot. It's like you're either with us or against us. You're either for us or with the terrorists.
That was all the time. You see that? It's like, you can either have this or this. There's a lot of gray area in life, and in any field, there is some gray. So looking at it that way. Let's keep going. Okay, so here's a couple examples. When Obama or Bush, insert which one you want, became president, the economy plummeted. Therefore, our economic problems are all of his fault. That's making some assumptions and leaps there that there's no other faculties or other options and things that are involved in that, because it's not just one thing that causes it. It's a complex situation, and it's not just because of this. Yes?
It's a great motivator, though.
It is.
Blaming somebody for something is a way to motivate people to take a side against them.
It is a huge motivator and effective.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, and this is one of the things that I've had to deal with in my own studies, is there are a lot of unethical, effective strategies for persuading. And that's when you start getting into coercion and a number of other things. And so understanding the process of communication and messages and how you can get people to do things, that's some serious power on your shoulders. And using it ethically and for the right reasons, that's something you have to kind of hold yourself accountable for. Because you're right, you can certainly skew things. And the more you understand, you could actually, instead of looking at these to analyze the media or different sources for their use of these and, bad, you could potentially look at these
These same
and
things
use
are on
them.
lists.
These are all strategies.
They're listed as strategies for how to win an argument.
And they are strategies for winning an argument. Now, the ethics involved in that, that's up to you, and it depends on the context. Each field is different with that, and you're right, they are all strategies. You don't necessarily, BATNA. Who can tell us what BATNA is for a conflict? Yes?
Best alternative to a negotiated agreement.
So there's all these different ways you've got strategies involved, and I won't get into that right this second, that'd be a whole other session, but there's all these strategies you can use, some ethical, some not, and it's playing with the skills that you've got and knowing when to draw the line. So fallacies certainly go the wrong way, but also, like we said, you can use them to your advantage, just keeping within those ethical limits. Here's a fun one that I found. If silent movies are black and white, and pandas are black and white, then pandas must be silent movies. Okay, that was just for fun. No, that's not the academic version, but so cute. credentials. Keep in mind, omission is lying, so we're talking about credibility and ethics. One of the things involved with this, and you do find it in conflict resolution, is treating the opposing side respectfully. Because the second you start talking bad about them, or having that negative connotation, or being very confrontational, they're going to shut down. And even if you don't care in the end what they look like, others may view you as well. So it's coming across, you may not feel that way internally, but coming across as being respectful and caring and having their best interest in mind as well. So if you can pull that off, then good for you. You definitely need to try and have everybody's interest in mind. Certainly knowing what your end state goal is. Some of it is a physical presentation or the appearance of yourself and your work. You look credible if you are dressed in a certain way, somewhat culturally as well. If we were in another country, what's culturally acceptable for one location is very different potentially than another. The presentation of your work. If you have paper just skewed all over the place, or if you're a total mess and can't find your notes, or if you're not on time, all those things lend to losing some sense of credibility. It's certainly the perceived character of the speaker. And people, you're projecting an impression that you are someone worth listening to. You're supposed to, at the beginning of some sort of public speaking, which I didn't really do today. I guess I did, now that I think about it. Hey, I'm a professor here at NOVA, and I teach these things. I know what I'm talking about. Does it mean that there's not plenty I can learn? But presenting something to help people know that you are worth listening to, that you know your stuff. Make yourself into an authority on the content. Whatever it is you're talking about, you have to display the sense of authority. You need to look like you're confident about what you're talking about. And even if internally you are second-guessing yourself, if you don't show that confidence, how on earth do you expect somebody else to? And this is one of the things that comes up in public speaking all the time. I have students that are nervous, and I totally understand why. A lot of them are undergraduates in public speaking class, the lower ones, and they're nervous. Sometimes they haven't really spoken in front of groups. Some of them, for example, like one that comes to mind was homeschooled. She's not really had these experiences. And so you've got the students that are doing the body language, kind of like, they're like this, and they're nervous. They're not coming across as confident. They're kind of dangling their hair, and they're just uncomfortable, and you can see it. Or they, which I kind of thought was PowerPoint, but they kind of hide intentionally off behind something else. They will tend, I've seen it happen where they'll take, and I've actually seen project presentations like this too, where they'll take an entire set of papers and more or less do this so they don't have to engage with people. And so keeping that from, try and remove those from the situation, and it's a lot better. One-on-one, it's the same thing, or a small group. If you can keep the things that are dividing you from occurring. Example I've seen, I love negotiation tables, for example, where it's round instead of something where there's a hierarchy just by placement of where you're sitting, and it does bring people together. So even in my classroom situation, when I can, I like this one if you can't do it, but I move the desk and intentionally make them sit together in a way that there is no hierarchy and it's not the professor in the front of the room. Same thing happens in meetings. If you're doing some sort of workshop, if you are trying to do a proposal for a business, if you can make people feel like they are part of it and not you in charge, or you have to give some sort of sense of authority, but not you standing over them in an overly confident way. It's be confident, be somewhat assertive, especially being female. You can get passed over very easily if you don't display yourself as confident and knowing your stuff. And studies have been done where they've shown for women, we have to actually let people know about our credibility. It's better when it's not done by us and somebody else says, oh, Dr. So-and-so, and they intentionally kind of implant some of that credibility for you. Or you pass like a business card and it tells an association with where you're a professor, where you're working. But what happens, unfortunately, for women is people don't necessarily take us as seriously until they know our credentials. Right or wrong, that's unfortunately kind of how it works. And so for us, it's very, very important to do that, to look the part, to sound the part, to believe in the part, because if we don't, men and women, if you sound like you're nervous or you're not sure about what you're actually talking about, you've lost it. And so even if there's nothing else that you take away from this, it's that forcing yourself to be confident. And it occurs in public speaking all the time with language. I've got, I would say, a lot of students that are second language learners. Holy cow, these are people that know more than one language, better than I know English half the time. I mean, that's impressive right there. But a lot of the students will come in and they're nervous and they're not sure about the words they're using or the pronunciation. And they speak so soft because they're nervous and they don't really want you to hear what they're saying.